Hear the word of the Lord from Exodus 20. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son, or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, male or female slave, ox, donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. When all the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking, they were afraid and trembled and stood at a distance and said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die." Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid, for God has come only to test you and to put the fear of him upon you, so that you do not sin." Then the people stood at a distance, while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. And also from Deuteronomy 5. Then Moses convened all Israel and said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the statutes and judgments that I am addressing to you. You shall learn them and observe them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. Not with our ancestors did the Lord make this covenant, but with us, all of us who are alive here today. The Lord spoke with you face to face at the mountain from the midst of the fire." This is the word of the Lord.
Imagine my surprise this morning when Jimmy handed me the bulletin and I realized I was preaching. Let's see how this goes. Just kidding. Just wanted to break one of the commandments, just for kicks. So, if I were to quiz you on the commandments, how many do you think you would get? You know, maybe a nice 8 out of 10. I don't know, maybe some of you are really confident. You think, oh, I could nail all 10 of them. Well, another question. When you think of the 10 Commandments, what comes to mind? What comes to mind? want you to think for a moment. Does the phrase, "thou shalt not," come to mind? Well, maybe a couple of other images might come to mind. Rembrandt's rendering of Moses holding the stone tablets over his head, or perhaps it's Charlton Heston playing Moses in Cecil B. DeMille's movie. Yes, we imagine these words billowing from the mountaintop. The rules are listed, the prohibitions are made, the imperatives are enunciated. Well, if you're like me, I think it's probably been a while since you've rehearsed the top 10, as I'll call them. Some of you need a refresher course. Well, and I'd like us to do one better. What if the 10 Commandments were set to music? Okay. Here we go. You want to stay?
Oh look, the monsters are here. Come on in, guys. Kids, you remember Frankenstein? Count Dracula? Hello, kids. Y'all are just in time. 10 Commandments. Here we go. Commandments. 10 Commandments. 1, have no other gods before me. 2, don't bow to man-made things. I'm gonna sing. 3, don't misuse God's name. 4, don't forget the Sabbath, make it a habit. 5, honor your parents, Clarence. 6, do not kill, it's God's will, Jill. And keep 7, don't commit adultery. 8, take it, Frankie.
Do not steal.
9,
Do not lie.
10, do not covet. What is covet? I'm not sure. The 10 Commandments, no one can keep them all. 10 Commandments, even on your best behavior. 10 Commandments, no one can keep them all. 10 Commandments, and that's why we need a savior. Alright, kids, you ready?
Yeah.
Remember, we're just counting to 10. 1, have no other gods before me. 2, don't bow to man-made things. I'm gonna sing. 3, don't misuse God's name. 4, don't forget the Sabbath, make it a habit. 5, honor your parents, Clarence. 6, do not kill, it's God's will, Jill. And keep 7, don't commit adultery. 8, take it, Frankie and the count.
Do not steal. Do not lie.
10, do not covet. Seriously, what is covet? I want to stop doing it. The 10 Commandments, no one can keep them all. 10 Commandments, even on your best behavior. 10 Commandments, no one can keep them all. 10 Commandments, and that's why we need a savior. The 10 Commandments, no one can keep them all. 10 Commandments, even on your best behavior. 10 Commandments, no one can keep them all. 10 Commandments.
Now you got them. And now that tune is stuck in your head, you can resent me all you want. So when we hear the 10 Commandments, do they seem burdensome? Like a set of rules to keep? Do we grade ourselves against them? Do we give ourselves a report card? Well, I haven't lied or murdered today. I'm feeling good about myself. I haven't coveted my neighbor's new car or looked longingly at their ox. That seems rather strange. But anyway, if that was our approach, I think we would be getting them all wrong. I want us to notice how the commands begin. This offers us some context. It begins with God saying, I am the Lord your God, and I delivered you from Egypt. There's a way in which, from the very beginning of these commands, God says, I have bound myself to you. I revealed myself to you in the burning bush to Moses, in your deliverance from Egypt, from oppression, in the cloud by day and in the fire by night. I am the one who parted the Red Sea and swallowed your enemies. I chose you among all peoples. I sought you out when you were in bondage. I did not forget you. I heard your cries for help, and I led you out with my very own hands. There are several places where the commands come up in Exodus and Deuteronomy. And I think the passage that Kathy read from Deuteronomy is helpful to us because we hear the voice of Moses setting the context for these imperatives. I want us to hear verses 2 through 4 again. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. It was not with our ancestors that the Lord made this covenant, but with us, with all of us who are alive today. The Lord spoke to you face to face out of the fire on the mountain. When we listen to this context, the Lord is emphasizing that we are in relationship with one another. We speak face to face. I want to know you, and the invitation is for you to know me. There's one more layer to this that emphasizes this relationality. But first of all, I want to do a quick word association with the Ten Commandments. So when I say the word command, you think what? Obey. Right? That's how we've heard these commands. Obey the Ten Commandments. But see, the problem is, the word obey does not appear in the Hebrew language, which makes us pause for a moment. The word obey, the very word that we've attached to these commands, does not exist in Hebrew. And in fact, the Jews don't even refer to them as commands. They refer to them as the 10 words or the 10 utterances. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 1 begins with this language. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. What I want us to notice is that the preface to these commandments is for us to draw near, to lean in, to be engaged with something that is of utmost importance. The word in Hebrew is Shema. It means hear. This is the invitation of these words, to pay focused attention, to understand, to internalize, to take to heart, to respond in action. It was interesting. Hans Kuhn said this: the Greeks worshipped what they saw, the Jews worshipped what they heard. It's interesting, as I was sitting here, I thought of Jesus for a moment when he said, "My sheep know my voice. That the invitation that continues, and we'll get to Jesus later, but the invitation that carries through into the New Testament is once again listening for the voice of God. Listening for the voice of God. If we shift our posture to align with what the Hebrew articulates, then our posture is much more one of communication within a relationship that matters to us. And the word here is at the heart of belonging. Jose Ortega y Gasset said this: "Tell me to what you pay attention, and I will tell you who you are." That's an interesting statement. Tell me what you are paying attention to, and I will tell you who you are. Let me illustrate it this way. Your child or a nephew or a niece says to you, something happened today. And you pause what you're doing because they have a story, an experience that they want to share with you. This is how we connect and feel a sense of belonging, of value to one another. So the question is, do we stop what we are doing and listen? Or do we continue to glance at our phone as they talk to us? A friend says to you, I had this great idea. And they're inviting us to give our attention to them. So do we take a posture of curiosity, wanting to know more? Because hearing is about relationship. All of these meanings and other ways that we could illustrate this are inherent in this word, this Hebrew word, Shema. I want us to think about for a moment, what is God's posture towards these words? Well, God has chosen belonging to us. God is committed to us. God in creation and through their sacrificial love has made us, God has made us the object of their attention and affection. God's posture, even when we fail. We just need to pan to the Genesis account of the fall. What is God's response to our failing, to our very first failing, one among many? Where are you? He's calling out to us. Where are you? Where are you? I want to walk around this a little bit more, offering a little bit of perhaps alternative perspective. What follows here is not reducible to commands, not simply commands, but promises. Might I suggest, in these 10 words, as our Hebrew friends would say, that God is saying, this is what will characterize your life as you live in relationship with me. This is what you will know, and this is how you will be able to participate in my life if you listen. This is the flourishing life you will live into. You will make promises and actually keep them. You will be faithful to your most important relationships. You will not grasp for what is not yours. You will not do violence to your neighbor or treat another person as mere property. When you live in relationship with me, you will treat each other with honor and respect. And there's more. You will not live under the tyranny of work, relentlessly competitive and feeling compelled to find your identity by being better than someone else. No, instead, you will slow down and you will enjoy rest and you will experience the fidelity of my love for you. How does that sound? That sounds a little better than, what is COVID? I love that. I love counting. Let me ask you this question. As we walk around these words, if you are in the production of a play and the director gives you what my daughter has told me are called notes, this is a nice way of saying, here's how to do better. So if the director gives you some notes as to how to convey a line, or how to look at the audience, or a choreographer rehearses you hard on the steps that you're to take, or perhaps you have a trainer at the gym, those blessed trainers who are pushing you to do things you do not want to do, but maybe you want to do, or maybe you have a supervisor who says to you, I'm not sure you're giving me your best work. Thanks, Sal. He's never said that. Wanted to, but hasn't. No, like, think about it. Do you maybe resent them? Maybe. Maybe you mumble under your breath. But what if you believed that they had your best interests in mind? What if you thought that director wanted you to bring the best possible performance? What if you thought your trainer actually could envision you being healthier? What if you felt a deep sense of trust that they wanted what was good for you? Then perhaps their strict, exacting approach might actually be saying to you, I value you. Wow. I wrestled when I was in junior high and high school. I was gonna find a picture. There's like one picture that exists of me wrestling. And anyway, I had this wrestling coach in high school, Mr. Perna, who was a Marine veteran, and already this story is going down a particular path. And he was a ball. Well, he wasn't very tall, so he was literally this compact ball of fiery red intensity, and I thought one day that that vein in his neck was going to pop. And I was gonna say, I saw that coming. But the truth is, if you survived the first 3 weeks, they were legendary. If you have survived the first 3 weeks of practices, which many did not, you walked with your head held high because he pushed you. And in doing so, he drew something out of you you didn't know was there. So what if we saw these words in Exodus as God wanting to draw out of us our very best? Let's talk some more about the purpose of these words. These commands give life and shape to the covenant. These words are about our formation, which nurtures and protects flourishing. They recognize that we need to guard our desires, our emotions, our will, our thoughts. That we are, and we are, capable of distortion and waywardness, of weakness. So the purpose underneath these words is to strengthen our relationships with God, with ourselves, with each other. And so we notice in the Ten Commandments, as they're called, there are particular prohibitions against wronging one another, whether falsely testifying against a neighbor, defrauding them, or killing them. And the Levitical system will go into even more specifics about particular injuries and what is a just response, even when it's accidental. And so the Levitical law, builds this out. But if we forget that at its very heart, it is about our relationship with one another, it is about protecting and nurturing the dignity and care of others as we live in life, in community. And it extends to our treatment of creation. So let's pause. I've already mentioned a little bit of Jesus' perspective on these words, but I want to walk us through a few different things as we imagine Jesus, centuries later, engaging these very same commandments. And can the way that Jesus engages these commands give us a look back into Exodus and Deuteronomy and posture ourselves in a way that I think is healthier? Jesus picks up on this Hebrew notion of hearing on several occasions when he says this: "For the one who has ears, listen." As if it was possible to have ears and not listen. Because he knows that we are capable of this. But see, Hebrew does not have this dichotomy. It doesn't. If you have really heard, then you respond. If you don't respond to the words, if you don't live into the words, then you have not heard them. Now, we all know this because at least one of our parents has said to us on many occasions that what they said went where? In one ear and out the other. This is Jesus' way of saying it. So when God commands us to do certain things and refrain from other things, it's not because his will is arbitrary, but because he cares for the integrity of the world as his work and for the dignity of the human person made in his image. So, interestingly enough, when Jesus has a conversation with the rich young ruler, he seeks to get to the heart of the matter. That Jesus is saying the words on the surface are not sufficient. So the rich young ruler comes to him and says, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus says, "Why do you call me good?" Blah, blah, blah. It's interesting banter. So then he starts, the rich young ruler says, you must not commit adultery, you must not murder, you must not steal, you must not testify falsely, honor your father and mother. That's actually Jesus talking. And the man replies as Jesus goes through the checklist, and he doesn't need to quote them all for him to know he's referring to all of them. Jesus, by starting to list these, assumes he understands where he's going with it. And he says, maybe with a little bit of pride, "I've obeyed all of these commandments since I was young." And if we thought the commands were about measuring up, about checking the boxes, about doing what God has asked us to do, thank you for playing, what do we have for the rich young ruler? Jesus says, "Oh, that's great. one other. This is a command that's kind of like off of the exam. This isn't the one that's usually on the exam, but I'm going to give you a bonus question or a bonus assignment. And he says, sell everything you have and follow me. And suddenly, Jesus got to the heart of the matter, which is, what is holding your heart? And Jesus is suggesting to us that it is possible for us to have rival loves. Okay, if we think that's not the case, perhaps, we'll just set that aside for a moment. Jesus at times engages with some of the commands that we know. For example, don't murder, don't commit adultery. And Jesus says, there's something else. So, good. You haven't bumped anyone off today. That's great. But were you irrationally angry at someone? Did you lose your cool? Now, is Jesus just saying, I want to raise the bar, I want to make it harder for you, just in case you're feeling good about yourself, I want you to feel bad about yourself? No, he's peeling back the layer and he's telling us what is underneath the commands, these words that were delivered and chiseled into stone in Exodus. So why wouldn't he say, did you lose your cool? Does that matter? And Jesus is saying, yes. So we didn't commit adultery. Did we linger too long looking at someone in a way that was diminishing to them, that was selfish on our part? Does that matter? And Jesus is saying, yes, it does. Lastly, when Jesus was quizzed, right? Because it isn't just that we have commandments. It's, we should be able to rate them or summarize them or whatever. So, the Pharisees come to Jesus and they're giving him a bit of a hard time, and he's like, so what do you, yeah, good teacher, what do you think are the greatest commandments? How would you summarize them, being the great teacher that you are? And Jesus says, interestingly enough, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Do you find that in the Ten Commandments? Maybe. And second, Jesus says, the second one is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do you find those words in the Ten Commandments? Not exactly. What Jesus is doing is not only summarizing the commands, but he's telling us what is behind the commands. That these commands are ultimately about love. At their very core, they are about love. And so, I'll leave that alone. Anyway. In closing, the words you've longed to hear. I want to illustrate this because I thought there was something about this that caught my attention. So there's an interesting example from the story of Leah. Just to remind us, Leah is Jacob the patriarch's first wife. He didn't think it was going to be his first wife, but when he went into the tent, it wasn't Rachel, it was Leah. Meet Leah. Anyway, hopefully you remember the story. Anyway, she did not measure up in some way to her sister Rachel, and she felt this deeply. When she had her firstborn, she named him Reuben, which means the Lord has looked upon my affliction. Surely now my husband will love me. Next, she gave birth to Simeon. And she says this, because the Lord has heard me, that I am hated, and he has given me a son. What she is saying is the Lord has shamad me. The Lord has heard that I am unloved. God practices this and lives into this kind of hearing to our lives. So this sense of hearing is not distant, it is not unfeeling, it is not uninvolved. God has bent his ear to her, bending low to her in her shame, and heard. And as God listens, he takes it to heart. He grieves with her sense of loss, and responds, because this is part of hearing. And this idea of hearing is essential to covenant love. This is this beautiful exchange that God models in Leah's life. And in Jesus we see it. Jesus hears the people. This is a beautiful thing. You see, the law is personal. And if we hold it at arm's length, then we dismiss the fact that at the heart of it, it is relationship. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Now, sadly, something I want us to notice about this story from Exodus, which is understandable and tragic. It's this, that after God speaks, what do the Israelites say? They say to Moses, you go and talk with God. We'll stay here. We'll stay here. We'll stay here. You go and talk to God. And this is not what God wanted. Because it's so easy for a relationship to deteriorate when there's not proximity. When we're not speaking face to face, where there's not an exchange of words and feelings and understanding and empathy. And this is what God offered to Leah. And this is what God desires with us. And so when we think, for example, of the command, do not have any idols. We're like, God, you're so picky, you know. But ultimately, idolatry is about love. And it is possible for us to have rival loves that hold our attention, that vie for our affection, and compete for our allegiance. And they don't have to be a golden calf. We would not be so naive, would we? When we keep our promises to people in our lives, we are living out the value we have for them. We are saying that we are bound together in love, and that this love takes the shape of actions that are tangible, that are reliable. So, I want us to hear because God is speaking to us. I want us to hear because we are loved. I want us to hear because God is offering us the opportunity to give our love in return. Amen.